Directed by Andrew Bayard and starring Guy Pearce and Alex Pettyfer, we are talking Sunrise, which is a kind of vampire horror film, sort of. So this is one of those movies that try to take place in an undisclosed kind of time period. It looks relatively modern, but we also see people kind of dress in somewhat kind of period style kind of clothes. So, you know, it takes place broadly in modern times, but some reason some people wear old-fashioned clothes. Whatever. It takes place around the Pacific Northwest of America, and there is a small town which seems to be somewhat kind of cut off from the kind of the rest of society, so to speak. And we learn that there is this legend of effectively a vampire type kind of entity that is in this forest that, you know, indigenous people have sacrificed things to, and that's kind of the setup for this film. And we have Guy Pearce's character, who appears to be some type of in position of power, maybe the kind of the mayor, or he owns the kind of the land or something, and he's effectively trying to coerce this Chinese family off their land, and he's like super racist about it. And he ultimately kills the father of this Chinese family, trying to bully them out. But they're kind of not going anywhere. And then we have this mysterious figure turn up, played by Alex Pettyfer, who appears to be a vampire. Maybe the kind of been affected by this kind of demonic kind of legend that they call the kind of the red coat. Anyway, and Alex Pettyfer's character kind of takes some pity on this Chinese family and appears to be helping them against the Guy Pearce's tyrannical rule. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Sunrise. Now, if you are going into this expecting a full-on vampire horror movie, let me stop you right there. This is more like a kind of drama, but just has that supernatural kind of tinge, I suppose. Yes, there is a kind of a few tropes that are consistent with vampire lore, but it's really not played up at all. It really kind of plays down the horror. I mean, I class it as a horror because, or under the horror banner, because it is about a vampire, but it's kind of a drama first rather than any type of thriller even, or horror. So just bear that in mind. But let's talk about the positives first of all within this film. So I have to say this movie is fairly kind of well produced on a technical level. It looks like it's somewhat kind of polished. There's somewhat kind of like polished production value. It very much feels like a kind of like a film that is Andrew Baird, the director here, feels like he's got a kind of assured hand. The pacing is deliberately slow. And you know, it just has a somewhat of a kind of like a reasonable kind of production to it, if that makes sense. It's, you know, it looks like it's got, you know, all the sound design and everything is fine, all that kind of stuff, the editing. So on a technical level, I think this movie is perfectly fine. The actors, obviously you've got a couple of recognisable faces here, and I mean, they're a bit overwritten, and I'll come on to that, but I think the actors do an okay job of making you, you know, hate the bad guy, you know, you feel sorry for the kind of this Chinese family, and, you know, have kind of like a little bit of intrigue about our kind of mysterious, kind of like Alex Pettyfer character. They do an okay job. Like I said, I think you're a little bit overbaked, but I don't think it's necessarily the actor's fault. So, but the acting is, I would say, okay. The acting's sort of okay. I think there is an interesting mythology here. A very subtle vampire film. Like I said, this is playing it much more, I suppose, trying to be a bit more kind of realistic, I guess. I mean, there's nothing overtly sort of like, you know, vampiric about Alex Pettyfer's character, outside of that he kind of needs to sort of drink blood, and he's quite happy with chicken blood. So it's trying to go for certainly a subdued, more realistic idea here, and that kind of plays in with that more of a drama aesthetic, as this movie is more about the kind of the relationships between the different sort of characters and things like that. So, you know, it's, if you like a kind of more of a drama, more of the horror, then maybe this movie might be a bit more of an interest to you. But let's talk about what doesn't work in this film. So, but this movie, I mean, it's a very, very slow-paced film. And when it comes down to it, the story really isn't that complex. It's a very much like, you know, a family is getting pushed around by another family, and then we have this stranger who turns up to kind of help them. And that's kind of it. It doesn't get really any deeper than that. I mean, it's like, it feels drawn out. There needed to be a little bit more going on here. I think this movie thinks it's fairly intellectual, but it doesn't really have, you know, there's not a lot of depth in it, I didn't think, in regards to the kind of the story. I think the movie also is, the world that this movie is setting up just feels woefully inadequate. I mean, like I said, it's like, it has this sort of style where Guy Pearce's character, you know, he's looking like he's dressing up for the 19th century, but obviously we have cars and things like this and like relatively modern amenities and things. But why? I mean, it's just like, why have we done that? I mean, there's just no explanation given. The vampire kind of mythology is very kind of loose, is all I'll say. So it feels like it just wants you to accept things, you know, without kind of sort of doing the work and kind of building it up. The acting, as I said, I think the acting is actually fine, but the characters are written to be a little bit too stereotypical. Like Guy Pearce's character, for example, is just like so unbelievably overtly racist. You're thinking, really, surely that you know, if you're getting harassed that much, there would be places for this Chinese family to turn, especially since they've murdered the father. I mean, he's got the local sheriff in his pocket, but surely you could go, you know, you could talk to the FBI or something, or someone else kind of outside of this kind of town if you thought there was corruption. Alex Pettyfer's character, you know, he's like the typical mysterious kind of like sullen stranger, and it's just a little bit, it just feels a little bit too hammy, to be honest. They're just kind of like overcooked a little bit. I don't necessarily blame the actors though. I think this is how these characters have been directed and written, and this is just their performance. I think the performances are okay, but it's just their characters are kind of just overcooked. And then yeah, just the kind of like the fact that this family seems to be really, you know, these victims of really bad kind of like treatment, but they just seem to not really do anything with it. I mean, they don't seem to turn to, I mean, considering that there's, I mean, they don't know for sure whether the dad was murdered, but he has been. And there's like, they don't sort of ask for help for anyone else. Why do they let kind of like the Alex Pettyfer character just stay in their house as like a stranger living in their barn? There's no real reason for that. They just let him stay. Why does he actually help them? I mean, he has his vendetta against Guy Pearce's character himself. But, you know, again, it's just not really, those relationships just aren't really built up. So I think the movie is, on a technical level, quite well made, but it needed to have more to it. It just feels like, as it stands at the moment, a very slow-paced film with not a lot of meat on the bone. So it's a lot of nothing. So it's a kind of a movie where the craft of the film, I can think, has been, you know, I can't really criticise too much about like the cinematography, like, you know, sound design, stuff like that. I think that's all fairly good. But the actual contents of the narrative and the characters is really where it really kind of like falls down. But I'm sure people don't care about you know, good sound design if the kind of the story is boring, the performances are over the top, and the lore is not explained. So there you go. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do let me know, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.